Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, the entire officer archetype guide. We're gonna cover all archetypes that the officer offers, and we're gonna speak about the homeworld, about the origin, and about multiple different builds in the game, where I'm gonna explain every little talent, ability, and skill in detail, full detail. Let's not waste time. Let's go.
Are you ready for Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader? Because I am. The Emperor protects.
Now we're gonna switch to officer. So what is the officer? Archetype officer. Officer is the most obvious choice when you wanna play as a support. How it goes? Basically, you are buffing your entire squad, and you are the main focal point of the entire game. In other words, it's how good you play, that's how strong your companions will be. You need to know exactly when to use every single supportive spell, and if you do it in the right way, you'll never fail in a fight. If you make a mistake as a support, especially on the harder difficulties, your entire squad will suffer and you will lose the fight. So there are two sides of the coin when you decide to play as an officer. If you go wrong, everything will backfire. If you do it right, you will stomp. Officer can be played in three different ways post level 16. As a Vanguard, as a Master Tactician, and as a Grand Strategist. What is an Officer Vanguard? Officer Vanguard is for those that like to play a tanky taunter officer, a tanky taunt support. Okay, something like an off tank. It's not exactly a pure tank like Warrior Vanguard. This is more like an off tank, but still bulky enough to withstand hilarious amount of damage output. Master Tactician would be an offensive ballistic support. What does it mean? It means that if you pick to play Master Tactician, you will use a lot of range weapons, and your allies are supposed to be mostly ranged allies, ballistic allies. It's a shooting squad. Okay, that's what Master Tactician is. And the third option would be a Grand Strategist officer. What is a Grand Strategist? Grand Strategist is also a support, but this time instead of buffing unit per unit, or better to say companion then the other companion and so on, you're buffing out an entire area, okay, on the map, where enemies become weaker or allies become stronger. What we're gonna cover first is a classic officer, and we're gonna start from the main feature. It would be voice of command. What is voice of command? The officer forces an ally to fully push themselves, increasing their characteristics by +5, +2, multiplied officer fellowship bonus for a round. Additionally, all of the officer's abilities can be applied to the target of voice of command from any distance. A character who becomes the target of voice of command cannot be targeted again by this ability for the next 2 rounds. Now let's translate this in short term. Your officer as a base character, default officer character, needs to have huge fellowship, but later about it when we pick homeworld and origin for all officer archetypes. So once you apply voice of command on your ally, they gonna receive a lot of benefits and you're gonna mark them. They become a mark where you can additionally put new buffs and new spells that will get stronger and stronger the stronger the voice of command is throughout the game. So you are the one giving orders and buffing up allies. The next main feature is the very first one that teaches you how to play an officer. So once you put voice of command on a companion, now you put bring it down. How does it work? The officer immediately grants an ally an extra turn, which is huge. It's basically play again. with action points equal to the officer fellowship bonus divided by 2. So the stronger your fellowship is as a main characteristic, the stronger Bring It Down is. Allies will receive more action points. If the ally is under the effect of Voice of Command over here as your main spell, so if someone is already in the effect of the Voice of Command and kills an enemy before the end of the officer's turn, the ally gains a one-time additional +2 multiplied ally resolve momentum. In other words, you're gonna be able to use ulti faster, okay, on a companion that has Voice of Command. In other words, Bring It Down is one of the best skills that exists in a game by far. I would say top 5 skills in a game. It's a free turn and it's a great buff. Single target though. Now it is time that we check the ultimate spell, or better to say a heroic act, heroic spell, call it how you like, for the officer, default officer. The officer grants an ally an extra turn with full action points and movement points. During the extra turn, the ally does not have a limit on the number of attacks. Absolutely broken. And a top 5 ultis in the game. Okay, it's not only the spell that gives action points, it's also ulti, but ulti gives as well movement points and huge number of attacks. Okay, this is very good if you put it on a huge damage dealer like Argenta or Heinrichs or some companion that has huge damage output. And now we're gonna check active abilities, active spells, active skills for the officer. So once you put Voice of Command, now you can stack up all of these spells on top of it. And the first one in line would be Get Back in the Fight. Get Back in a Fight is an HP buff and status removal. So the officer encourages an ally who immediately recovers from burn, bleed, toxic and stun effects. If the target is under the Voice of Command, again, everything. And when you play officer on every turn, you wanna put Voice of Command first, no matter what you do, and then you want to trigger the rest of the spells. It's always Voice of Command, and do not forget to use Voice of Command from round to round to round, okay? During the entire fight. That's the bread and butter spell. So, if the target is under the effect of Voice of Command, they will also gain 2 times Officer Willpower bonus, temporary wounds. This is great for a mage-like support, okay? Which I'll talk about later. So, Get Back in a Fight, basically, is a very useful spell. Very useful active skill. The next one would be Air of Authority. The officer increases an ally resolve by a value equal to the officer's own resolve until the end of combat. This is ulti buff, okay? Cast ulti earlier. That's the buff. If the target is under the effect of our main Voice of Command skill, they will start their next turn with an additional action point. Again, action points. If you notice on a Voice of Command, action points on Bringing Down, action points of Authority, action points and movement points with ulti. Okay, it's non-stop bonus action points. That's why this is one of the most fun classes to play with. Now we are at Air of Authority, action point bonus. The next one is MMM, move. Move is the opposite. It's for the movement points, okay? And let's see what it says. The officer immediately grants an ally additional movement points equal to his fellowship. So the stronger the fellowship of the officer is, the more movement points you get when you cast move. Now, if you casted Voice of Command first and then you casted move on your companion, the target will be under the effects of the Voice of Command and it's gonna ignore attacks of opportunity until the end of the officer's turn. When we use move with Voice of Command combo, or better say Voice of Command into move, when, for example, your melee, the enemy's melee attackers surround, I don't know, Argenta, and you want to extract her out, you use Voice of Command on Argenta, and then you use move, and she's out safely to the cover, and she can shoot without penalties. That's how you use move, move, move. Extremely important spells, extremely important ability. One of the abilities that's bread and butter, and you should learn it first. Basically, what you should have at the start is the one you get, bring it down, extraction points into the first one that you're gonna get is move, move, move. That's how important it is. The next one would be break their ranks, BTR, weapon skill buff ally. Okay, this spell, this active ability is there to buff up companions that are melee. Okay, so if you plan to play in a team, for example, with a tanky, bulky officer that's gonna become a Vanguard later on, and you surround him with Heinrichs, with a Space Wolf, with Abelard, they gonna profit like crazy from break their ranks. If you play with more ranged companions, then you don't wanna use break their ranks. Okay, that's how it works. This ability can only target allies who have enemies close to them, so they need to go together to break enemies' ranks. Until the start of the officer's next turn, all melee attacks made by the target deal additional damage equal to officer's fellowship bonus divided by 2 multiplied by the number of enemies close to the target when this ability is used. If the target is under the effects of voice of command, they immediately make an attack of opportunity against the enemy that's close, okay, if they are in melee range, targeting the ones with the lowest remaining wounds. This would be like an execution, okay, very good with more melees in a team, not good with only one melee in a team. That's the bottom line. The next one would be to me. To me, TM counts for a squishy officer. You can play this on a squishy officer. I'll give builds for each type of officer later on, of course. But now, let's see what to me does. This ability can only be used on allies who can reach the officer by moving fewer than 20 cells. So, in a range out of 20 cells, you use voice of command on an ally, and then you say to me, they run directly to you and protect you. Okay, you should usually do this on some huge things. Okay, you can also extract allies with it, but it's good. You know, you can extract a squish, but it's good to use it on a tank so he can protect you. The officer immediately makes an ally move toward the officer by taking the shortest possible path. If the target is under the voice of command over here, it gains +2 multiplied officer's willpower bonus percentage to armor. They become tankier until the end of the officer's turn. They're gonna come close to the officer and they're gonna protect him. Okay. Any attacks made against the officer will target them instead until the effect of to me ends. Great to use on a warrior Vanguard. Okay, or better to say, this is great to use on a tanky Abelard, for example, or on a Space Wolf. They come and they protect you. They offer protection, and they're bulkier and tankier because of the willpower bonus that you give them. Percentage goes to armor. That, yeah, of course, you only use to me if you're in danger. And if you're about to die, you don't use it just like that. This is like the last escape spell. And the last one would be take aim. Take aim, TA, would be BS buff ally. This would be ballistic buff for allies that are basically ranged. Okay, you are enhancing shooting abilities of allies. The target next attack will ignore cover and will have double the effect distance. Great on absolutely every shooting character in a game once you buff them. Now, if you put voice of command on them, they're gonna ignore enemy dodge, and the damage from this attack can't be reduced below 30 + 3 multiplied fellowship bonus for any reason. To put it short, they're gonna hit more often, and they're gonna make sure that they hit when you take aim. Okay, when you do this, for example, on a sniper on Irlet, or on Argenta, or I don't know, even on Pascal, if you make him ranged. If you go with take aim, voice of command into take aim, they're gonna hurt a lot with ranged abilities. What is also a very important thing to say about the officer when you pick an officer: if you go with a fellowship oriented officer, then he becomes a pure support. If you go and you want to create a Vanguard, you need to go with weapon skill and toughness backgrounds. If you go with Master Tactician and Grand Strategist, you will need ballistics, or better to say ranged spells combined with fellowship and willpower. If you're gonna use a mage-like officer, then you're gonna need fellowship and willpower. That's how it goes. Later about it. Now we're gonna switch to the officer main talents in the game. There's a lot of talents, as you can see here, and I already extracted them, what's good and what's not. So the first one would be CV, Commanding Voice, absolutely crazy good, and in short, the range of the officer abilities is increased by +3 and the voice of command is increased by +6. Mega important, because bread and butter skill is the voice of command. Yeah. So the first thing that you're gonna learn from talents is the Commanding Voice. The next one would be Steel Resolve. So and so, it depends out of the build, not as good as Commanding Voice. The officer resolve is increased by +3, the bigger the resolve is, the more you can use your ulti. The faster you can use your ulti. The next one would be Blood of Martyrs, BM, extremely important. Whenever an ally uses a heroic act, that ally gains temporary wounds equal to 10% of their maximum wounds plus resolve. This is like an aura, and the more heroic skills, or better say, the more ultis allies use, the stronger they become during the fight. That's how this works. That's why this is an extremely important talent. The next talent would be Focus, F. So and so, good but not as good as the ones I already gave. Whenever the officer uses an ability on an ally, the ally gains a bonus to their perception and ballistic equal to fellowship. The bonus is stack, but half of the stacks rounded up are lost at the end of the target's turn. If you have more ranged companions in your team, then you should take focus. If you have 50-50, you don't need it that much. If you have more melees, then you don't need it at all. That's how focus works. The next one would be Inspired Courage. Again, solid one, but not great. Whenever the officer targets an ally with an ability for the first time in a round, that ally will gain plus willpower temporary wounds. It's health upgrade, health buff. Okay, that's what it is. Not bad, I'm not saying how it's bad, but you can live without it. Okay, take if you must, if there is nothing else. The next one would be Personal Oversight. Whenever the officer targets an ally with an action, an ability or an attack, the ally's resolve is increased by +1 until the end of the officer's next turn. The effect stacks and it's prolonged until the end of the officer's next turn. Each time it stacks, cannot be prolonged past the officer's next turn. To put it up short, your allies will be able to use ultis sooner in combat. Solid one. Solid. The next one after PO is PE, Physical Encouragement. Physical Encouragement is also solid, not great. Whenever an ally starts a turn, including any extra turn close to the officer, the ally gains additional movement points equal to officer fellowship bonus divided by 2. It's like not even solid, okay. I would say below solid. You need to position when the combat starts, they need to be close to the officer. Now, you won't always be in a situation to do that, battlefields are different, okay. And you're always gonna be in a specific situation where this talent would be a complete waste, alright. And that's why it's not that good. Let's go to the next one. The next one is ID, Iron Discipline. Iron Discipline is also among solid buffs. Allies affected by the officer abilities gain a bonus to all resist tests equal to 2 times officer's willpower bonus. When you play as a Psyker officer, for example, that's when Iron Discipline comes to count. As far as other homeworld origin officers go, it's not that good because you won't scale that much out of willpower, okay? So you need to be careful on what type of officer you learn, what talent. This one doesn't merge with most of the officer subclasses. The next one would be MTP. MTP, I marked it as a great talent, more than possible. The target of Bring It Down gains +1 action point if they finish their extra turn using this ability with 0 action points. They will suffer willpower direct damage. More than possible is all in when you don't have ulti to give additional action points and movement points, and when you need to kill an enemy and bring it down, voice of command into bringing down is just not enough action points and you want to use more and burst out enemy, okay, then you can buff it up with more than possible talent. Alright, extremely good talent for unfair or hard, not as good on easier difficulties. The next one would be a lasting impression, LI. I marked it as a great one. Half of the bonus granted by the voice of command remains until the end of combat. This bonus does not stack with itself or with bonuses granted by voice of command, but does count as an officer ability effect for the purposes of other talent effects. So, if we dance with talents that have voice of command in them, they're gonna stick, even when voice of command expires. Extremely good, but I would say extremely good past level 20 or so, not before that. But still, this is a great combo because voice of command is your bread and butter skill as an officer. The next one would be Exemplar of Heroism, AH. I marked it as a solid one, not a great one. Whenever a heroic act is used in combat by any character, officer's next attack will cost 0 action points. Now, why did I mark it like this? Because most of the officer builds will be either tanky supports or full supports, okay, but very few people will actually play a damage dealing officer, and I already told you the damage dealing officer is Master Tactician. So if you plan to play as Master Tactician, then Exemplar of Heroism counts, okay. Post level 16 you pick a second tier class, better to say you pick a Master Tactician, and then this is when this talent counts, alright. In all other cases, I would never recommend taking Exemplar of Heroism, so be careful how you create your build. The next one would be Lead by Example, LA. I marked it as a great one. Whenever the officer makes an attack, they gain +5 fellowship until the end of the combat. Why I marked it as a great one? Because your main stat is fellowship, and all of your spells and skills actives scale from fellowship, some of them with willpower, but most of them with fellowship, okay, and this is a talent that straight up buffs fellowship ability, okay, and because of that, your spells are even stronger. Very good talent. The next one would be Personal Example, PE. I marked it as a solid one. Whenever the officer uses an officer archetype ability 2 times in one turn that does not grant an extra turn, and most of the abilities, let's be real, grant extra turn, they gain the Stand Witness effect. When they gain the Stand Witness, the next officer archetype ability that does not grant an extra turn will also affect the officer. If you are about to cast abilities that do not give action points to allies, so for example, if you cast Voice of Command, then you cast Move, then you cast Take Aim on the offensive support, for example, on a Master Tactician. Again, this is more for the Master Tactician build, of Officer Master Tactician build, then you will inherit all of your buffs that you gave to an ally to yourself. Okay, so you and ally combined will become stronger, right? Solid, but not for every build. The next one would be Armor of Contempt, AC. I marked it as a great one. Whenever an ally is affected by an officer ability or talent that grants temporary wounds, that ally armor is increased by 10% for a round, and it does not stack that talents. It's gonna give temporary wounds to your Voice of Command. Okay, so it's always temporary wounds, and that's why it's great. No matter what spell you cast later on as well, will give some type of temporary wounds. And whenever you do it, your allies become tankier. So when you cast this, for example, on Abelard, that's already tanky, he's gonna be even tankier, and enemies will not be able to kill him. It's a great talent, in other words. The next one would be Vigilant. Be Vigilant, I also marked it as a great talent. Allies under the effect of the officer's abilities gain a bonus to their weapon skill, equal to 3+ officer fellowship bonus. Again, it scales out of fellowship, and will deal plus fellowship more damage on attacks of opportunity till the start of the officer's next turn. This is very simple talent and a very good talent, a great talent. You enhance your melee allies by a lot, and they hurt a lot because of Be Vigilant. Very simple. If you play with more melees in your team, you should use this talent. The next one is IS, Inspiring Speech. I marked it as a solid talent, not great. Air of Authority immediately grants momentum to the target equal to the target's resolve. It won't work well always, okay, because some of your allies just don't have huge resolve, okay, and it's gonna bring very low amount of momentum, and some will have huge resolve and it's gonna bring a lot of momentum. And again, resolve equals momentum, momentum equals ulti, how fast you can use ulti, and ulti is the most powerful ability in the game, okay. So Inspiring Speech, I would not recommend this one, especially not to newcomers. The next one is S, Survive. I marked it as a solid one. Targets to me, when you extract an ally to come and defend you, they will take 15% less damage until the start of the officer's next turn. This reduction is doubled to -30% for targets taking their turn while under the effect of to me. Now, how does it work? Very simple. If they are to play after you and you used to me earlier, they're even tankier than when you use this spell without them playing. Survive, or better to say to me, can only be useful on very hard difficulties, on hard and on unfair, not as much on easier difficulties. The next one would be Wounds Are No Excuse. WA, I mark this one as a great talent. Get back in a fight. Removes a fresh injury from the target and heals the target for willpower bonus divided by 2 wounds for each condition removed by get back in a fight, including fresh injuries. A minimum of officer's willpower bonus divided by 2 wounds is always healed, even if no conditions are removed. Let me translate this very short. You're gonna spam get back in a fight like crazy, and this makes get back in a fight even stronger than it actually is, and it already received benefits when you whack Voice of Command into get back in a fight. And that's why I marked WA, or better to say, Wounds Are No Excuse, as a great skill. It's an extremely good buff. The next one would be Watch Yourself. I marked it as a great one. Targets of move, we shall be again spamming like crazy because move is extremely useful. Gain a 10% bonus to dodge and 10% bonus to cover efficiency until the start of the officer's next turn. Usually, you will use move to move a squishy, a shooter, or a mage into cover and whack enemies from afar. Once you move them to cover, they're gonna be dodgier and they're gonna use cover with 10% more efficiency. Or better to say, they're gonna be harder to kill. Very good, because you are about to spam, again, you are about to spam Voice of Command combo into Bring It Down, into Get Back in a Fight, into move. This is bread and butter. Almost on every turn you're gonna use those 4, and then once as you level up and you become stronger and stronger, you get additional action points where you're gonna use other skills. But this is bread and butter. And every spell, every talent that enhances bread and butter abilities is great. The next one would be S, Steady. I marked it as a great one. Take Aim also increases the damage of the next ranged attack by 2% for each cell between the attacker and the target. Imagine putting Steady, Take Aim, okay, on a sniper, and the enemy is like 20 to 30 cells away. That's 40 to 50% additional damage. Now if they crit, that's a one shot. No matter what the enemy is. Very good on hard and on unfair. You don't need it on easier difficulties though. The next one would be Seize the Initiative. I marked it as a solid one. At the beginning of combat, the officer gains an extra turn. During this turn, they can only use officer archetype abilities. You are not the one that are supposed to play a lot of times, you're the one that are supposed to make your allies play a lot of times. Okay, that's the entire point of playing the officer. Now, when is Seize the Initiative useful? Very useful when you're aggressive. When you have aggressive team, okay, aggressive team, all nukers, psychers, snipers, assassins, no freaking tanks, no freaking supports in a team, and you're gonna play as the only support, and you're gonna play as a master tactician, offensive support. That's when Seize the Initiative is good. In all other cases, it's not good. The next one would be Into the Jaws of Hell, IJH. I marked it as a great one for some reason, and let's see why. The officer gains plus 10 willpower and plus 10 fellowship, that's why. When they have less than 50% of their maximum wounds remaining. Absolutely crazy, okay? They also gain an additional 10 willpower and 10 fellowship after using any officer ability on a target with less than 50% wounds for a round. Absolutely crazy, that's plus 20, plus 20. 20 willpower and 20 fellowship. Who profits the most out of 20 willpower and fellowship? Everyone, every type, every archetype of officer will profit out of this spell. Okay, it doesn't matter what you play, whether you want to play as a Vanguard, as a Master Tactician, or as a Grand Strategist. But the origin, when you play as a Psyker, where you're gonna use both Fellowship and Willpower, this is where things get insane with Into the Jaws of Hell. Okay, cause in most of the times you will use this talent with a lot of benefits, especially if you play on hard or unfair. Then you will be under 50% of HP in nearly every combat. Now imagine how huge this 20 willpower and 20 fellowship buff is. Absolutely broken talent, I love it. The next one would be March M. I marked it as a solid one. Whenever the officer ability moves any target, the officer gains movement points equal to half the distance the target moved. If this happens on another character turn, the officer will gain these movement points on their next turn. This is solid on a Grand Strategist, okay? But not as much on all other archetypes, and that's why I marked it as a solid one. It's a archetype specific talent. Preparation for an archetype specific talent, basically. The next one would be No Respite. Whenever the officer, and the last one, whenever the officer ability grants action points to an ally, that ally also gains +1 to all characteristics for every action point gained until the end of combat. I marked No Respite as a great one, and it is indeed a great one, and I don't know why it's not recommended, but it's freaking great. Let's translate what it does. Whenever you say play again to an ally, and you're going to say play again non-stop, they get stronger. That's what it does in short. So yes, it's a great talent. Now, as far as talents still go, you remember like what I said for my warrior guide, I can say exactly the same here. If you play as a, if you're gonna prepare to play as a tanky officer, as a Vanguard taunting tank, then you're gonna go with Chain, you're gonna go with Melta, you're gonna go, you know, with power, weapon proficiencies and so on. If you're gonna play as, I don't know what, as a Master Tactician, offensive ballistic support, then you're gonna opt in for the type of weapon you're gonna use. I don't know if you wanna use a bolter, or if you wanna use a sniper, or if you wanna use Eldari perhaps weapon, okay, or laser weapon. That's your choice what you wanna use. So the weapon that you like the most is the one that you're gonna give and prepare your archetype Master Tactician officer. Okay, and you will need nimble and so on. Okay, you will need things that give you dodge, so you can actually dodge some hits. If you play as a tank, you need talents that are gonna buff you up, they're gonna buff armor. Okay, and if you play as a Grand Strategist, this is an all-around, and it's the best way by far to go with something like Grenadier. So you're gonna throw a lot of frags, on enemies, and this is where frags cost 0 action points. That would be from talent 2. Again, talent 2 depends out of the player. What I can say for sure is to avoid characteristic trainings, to avoid base skills, to not waste your talents on those, okay? If you're gonna waste talents, you will waste talents on something like it will not die, or, I don't know, solid projectile weapon if you plan to play as a sniper support, alright? Everything depends out of your weapon. The weapon you like the most, that's the talent in talents 2 that you will learn. I told you what are the best ones, but again it depends out of the archetype preparation. And now I am thinking whether to go straight for the archetypes or should we go straight to merging the homeworld and origin. Okay, let me tell you exactly how things stand with homeworld and origin for the officer, officer Vanguard, officer master tactician, officer grand strategist, officer exemplar. We're gonna switch to the homeworld immediately. As far as homeworld goes, if you decide to play with a Death World, that's a tanky officer, that's a Vanguard. If you decided to play with a Voidborn, that's a Psyker, okay, Psyker officer. You can play him as a Diviner or a Biomancer, ignore the other archetypes. If you plan to play with a Hive World, that's the best option by far, no matter what type of officer you're gonna use. This is the home world that merges the best with the officer archetype, no matter about subclass of that archetype. If you are to play as a Forge World, you don't play with a Forge World at all, you ignore the Forge World. Imperial World is the second best option after the Hive World for the officer. And the Fortress World is good for the ballistic support, or better to say, once you wanna prepare for the Master Tactician. Okay, after level 16. So now that we got clear with Homeworld for the officer, we need to merge that with Origin. The very first option would be an offensive officer, buffer and debuffer, and that would be Sanctioned Psyker. And if you are to play as an offensive officer with buffs and debuffs, you are supposed to pick a Biomancer. That's how you merge with the homeworld. Told you what's for what in the homeworld. So now rewind and check. If you are to play as a defensive officer, buffer and debuffer, you're gonna play as a Sanctioned Psyker, Diviner. So for offense, for aggressive playstyle, it's Biomancer. For defensive playstyle, it's Diviner. You should ignore Pyromancer and Telepath completely, because they are already companions that do that on your campaign, okay, on your run. That's why you should ignore it. The next one would be a tanky melee taunt buffer, and that would be a Sanctioned Psyker Sanctic. This is a tanky Psyker, okay, and those are the three that you can play as a Psyker only with Origin. So again, offensive, defensive, tank. That's it. The next option that you have is Origin Noble. Noble is the best option by far if you wanna play as a pure support. Alright, as a Grand Strategist, for example. Officer, Grand Strategist, support merges the best with Noble. Navy Officer would be the second best option, and Navy Officer is absolutely brilliant if you wanna play as an offensive range support. Okay, or better to say, as a Master Tactician. Ministerium Priest is a tricky melee off-tank. Okay, and I would recommend playing as a Ministerium Priest on your second run if you really decide to play as an officer. The next one would be Astra Militarum Commander. That's also a tricky part, but like I said, tricky melee for a priest. This is a very tricky option for a ranged officer, and you can play him as a Master Tactician. While Ministerium Priest officer, you're gonna scale for a Vanguard. As a Crime Lord, you cannot play an officer as a Crime Lord, but you can play him as a Commissar. And as a Commissar is the best option for a melee support, or better to say, Commissar is the best option for a Vanguard support. Now everything that I said for the home world, you're gonna merge with Origin, rewind if you have to, merge those, apply what I said for the Archetype Classic Officer, pick your talent smart. I told you how to prepare for the Vanguard, for the Master Tactician, and for the Strategist. And now we're gonna cover Vanguard, Master Tactician, and Grand Strategist, and see what's the best for them and what they do, basically. And now we're gonna check Archetype Officer Vanguard. Vanguard, as I said, same applies for Warrior and same applies for the Officer. This is the tankiest option that you can pick, or better to say, this is a tanky Officer. Vanguard's passive, so I repeat myself again, I guess, the more you get whacked, the stronger you are. That's the passive. Vanguard's ulti is not as good as Officer's ulti, so when you play as an Officer Vanguard, you would like to use Officer's ulti, not Vanguard's ulti. Now, as I said before, all of the Vanguard's active abilities are absolutely great, but this is different than a Warrior now, because now our most important ability would be follow my lead as an Officer Vanguard. Also, a very useful ability would be Disposal on an Officer Vanguard. And the bread and butter ability, and the most important one, would be Wall of Rockrit, where you're gonna upgrade Wall of Rockrit with Ferrocrit through talents. And that's when Vanguard Officer becomes really good, a good AoE tanky support. Of course, you will always need to be in a defensive stance. Now, as far as talents go, you want heavy armor talents, defensive talents, parry talents, everything that buffs armor talents, taunts, and every talent that buffs your Rockrit ability, like Ferrocrit here. If you are confused, you can always check my Warrior guide for the Vanguard, where I explained all of the talents in detail, so there is no need to do it for the Vanguard here as well, because it's the same freaking thing. Warrior Vanguard is a mega tank, while Officer Vanguard is just a tank, but he can make allies play again. Okay, that's the difference, the main difference. For the detailed explanation of what each talent does, check my Warrior Vanguard guide. And what's left from the Officer is his ultimate upgrades. Now let's see what they do and place them in order. The target of Finest Tower gains more bonuses. During their extra turn, the target deals Officer Fellowship bonus divided by 2 damage. Until the end of combat, the target gains the effect of Voice of Command. Great upgrade for the ulti. Now we go to the upgrade 2. The target of Finest Tower gains more bonuses. All negative effects are immediately removed from the target. Until the end of the officer's next turn, the target cannot die. Its wounds cannot be reduced below 1. Also, how would I divide this to? Easier difficulties, you will profit with upgrade 1. Harder difficulties, you will profit more with upgrade 2. The target gains temporary wounds until the end of combat by probably Fellowship calculation. Yeah, 3 times Officer Fellowship calculation. Well, very simple. When you target an ally with ulti and you tell them to play again with unlimited action points and movement points, they gonna gain temporary wounds as well, or better to say, their health will go up. Solid upgrade. And the final one is when the Finest Tower gains more bonuses during the extra turn. Any kill made by the target restores 1 action point, 1 movement point up to Fellowship times. The target can redirect the ability with their remaining action points and movement points to another target. Now, I played and I tested everything, okay. And I would say that the upgrade 4 is the one I benefited the most from, alright. And because again, you transfer those action points and movement points non-stop, so it's quite useful, you know. So how would I say that you should play and upgrade ultimate for the officer, for the flat officer? This should be the first one that you're gonna learn no matter the difficulty. Now, if you play on a harder difficulty, you will go 4-2. If you play on an easier difficulty, you will go with 4-1. And that's about it. Now, what is the most important ulti upgrade for the Officer Vanguard? Officer Vanguard will profit the most out of the upgrade 4 because we scale with Fellowship as an officer, and now when we're a Vanguard, our ulti will scale with Fellowship as well. In other words, you gain more momentum when you're whacked. That's the ulti. After we upgrade 4 on Vanguard's ulti, the next one we want to learn is upgrade 3. Okay, because we are a support Vanguard after all, an officer support Vanguard, so it's 4, then it's 3. You can ignore 1 and 2. In case of characteristics and other abilities, recommended ones are the ones that you're gonna go for. It's good with recommended, they did it well with recommendations. And now, for the very first time, we're gonna cover Master Tactician Archetype from level 16 to level 36, and how you should play an Officer Master Tactician. Master Tactician, again, is an offensive officer, aggressive officer, or better to say, this is an aggressive support. The main keystone feature for the Archetype subclass of the officer named Master Tactician is that the Master Tactician gains a stack of tactical advantage per every 5 momentum gained by the Master Tactician or their allies. So you're gonna get stacked non-stop because everyone gains momentum. The Master Tactician begins combat with the amount of tactical advantage stacks equal to their Fellowship bonus, and your Fellowship bonus is already huge because you are, after all, playing an officer. With the correct homeworld and origin, Fellowship bonus is absolutely hilarious. The next keystone feature is Press the Advantage. The Master Tactician empowers their next attack to deal 4% additional damage for every stack of tactical advantage. Of the bottom one, I said we're gonna stack it like crazy as an officer, yeah. So, to put it up short, the more stacks you got, the more pain you deal. As I said, this is an aggressive support. Now here we come to the ultimate ability of the Master Tactician. I still believe, strongly believe, that ulti from the officer is one of the best and better than this one, but let's cover Master Tactician ulti and see what it does. Again, it's a very aggressive ulti. The Master Tactician selects a 3x3 zone, so 9 tiles on the battlefield, and all allies, including the Master Tactician, I better say including the officer in this case, that have line of sight to any enemies inside the selected zone will make an immediate single attack against a random enemy they can target with their weapons within this zone. This would be a boss killer. Okay, that's what it is. Everyone will shoot at the boss. What you need to make sure of before you use directed firestorm, you need to make sure that all of your companions have a ranged weapon, okay? Because those that are melee and that are far away, they will not trigger ulti. All of your companions need to switch to their weapon set with ranged weapons before you use directed firestorm, and that's the entire trick. If you want to burst a boss, this is it. Again, I believe that Officer ulti is way much better than the Master Tactician ulti, but it's life. And now the time has come that we check active abilities, active skills, active spells for the Master Tactician. The first one in order would be Inspire. The target gains +1 damage and +1 additional damage for every 10 stacks of tactical advantage the Master Tactician has, but the Master Tactician loses half of their stacks of tactical advantage rounded up. This effect stacks and lasts till the end of the combat. If the target uses a heroic act before the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn, they're gonna regain 25 momentum. In other words, the stronger you are and the more stacks you have, the stronger you'll make your ally that you're gonna cast Inspire to, okay? And they're gonna hurt more. What's also very good from this spell is the recovery of momentum, where you can spam ulti. The next active ability would be Linchpin. The target ally or the Master Tactician gains +1 resolve for every 5 stacks of the tactical advantage the Master Tactician has. But the Master Tactician loses half of the stacks, effect stacks, blah blah blah. And now, until the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn, the Master Tactician gains stacks of tactical advantage equal to 20 + 3 multiplied Master Tactician Fellowship bonus of all momentum the target gains, instead of the usual 20%. Let's translate. In short, you will accumulate momentum faster, and you will be able to use your ulti faster. That's the spell. The next one would be Strong Point. The target gains +2 temporary wounds and +1 additional temporary wound for every 2 stacks of tactical advantage the Master Tactician has. But the Master Tactician loses half of their stacks of tactical advantage rounded up. Until the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn, whenever the target loses temporary wounds from damage, the target gains momentum equal to the number of temporary wounds lost. This Strong Point is a slightly better version of Linchpin. Why? Because you also gain momentum and you're also gonna be able to play with your ulti faster, but the entire difference is you're also gonna raise maximum HP of your allies, or better to say, of the one you target with a Strong Point. And that's the entire difference. I would say that it's better than Linchpin. The next one would be Assign Objective. The Master Tactician marks an enemy. If the enemy is killed by one of the Master Tactician allies before the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn, so in the turn you cast it, and as an officer, you're usually gonna play first. So that's why there's a huge benefit out of Assign Objective. The ally will gain 10 + 2, the ally resolve, momentum, and +5 to all characteristics until the end of combat. Probably the best active ability for the Master Tactician in the game. To translate this, you will always play first because you're an officer and you have huge initiative. In most cases you will play first. You put a mark on an enemy, and then no matter who kills the enemy, they get stronger. Way much stronger than they used to be. Extremely good ability. The next ability would be Fervor. The Master Tactician suffers direct damage equal to 20% of their maximum wounds, their maximum health. Gain Master Tactician resolve stacks of tactical advantage and resets the cooldown of Linchpin, Inspire, and Strong Point. Until the end of the Master Tactician turn, these abilities can only target the Master Tactician themselves. This is a late game spell where you're gonna need cooldowns reset. How do we use Fervor? Cause it's only 0 action points. You're gonna use Inspired, you're gonna use Strong Point, you're gonna use Linchpin, okay? And then you're gonna trigger Fervor, and then you can use all of those skills again. Okay, it's basically what you did as an officer for allies, you know, play again to someone. Now you say to yourself, play again. Not in the exact same way, but you can replay, okay, skills that you already played and that are now on a cooldown. They won't be on a cooldown anymore, and it's 0 action points, so basically it's free. And the last ability would be Finish the Job on an enemy creature within weapons range this time. Can only be used on enemies with the Unfinished Business effect. This effect is applied to enemies which were attacked by the Master Tactician allies but not by the Master Tactician, and have less than 50% of their maximum wounds remaining. This is a very complicated thing to trigger, especially for newcomers. You need to calculate and you need to plan ahead for Finish the Job, or better to say, you need experience in this game if you wanna use Finish the Job in the correct way. The Master Tactician immediately attacks the target with a single shot or a strike. This attack does not count toward the attacks per turn limit, so it's a free attack, but again, you need to know what you're doing. Dealing half of the weapon maximum damage and an additional plus ballistic skill damage. And this is why I said that a Master Tactician is an offensive support. Ballistic offensive support. 4. Hard and for unfair. Bread and butter abilities would be Finish the Job, Fervor, Strong Point, and Inspire. 4. Easier difficulties. Inspire is the one you want to go first, then you want to go with a Strong Point, then you want to go with Fervor, and then you want to go with the Assign Objective. That's about it. And now it's time that we check talents for Officer, Master, Tactician. The first one would be Hidden Advantage. All the Tactician abilities work as if the Tactician has the Tactician Fellowship bonus more stacks of Tactical Advantage. To put it up short, it's very important because you're an officer. And the bigger your Fellowship is, and it's already huge, the stronger your Tactical Advantage is, or better to say, you accumulate those stacks faster. It is a talent that you should learn first. It's not over there just like that, okay? It's recommended for a reason for an Officer, Master, Tactician. The next one would be Joint Offensive. For every enemy hit by the Master Tactician attack, the Master Tactician gains a stack of Tactical Advantage. Again, pay attention on a Tactical Advantage and on a Press the Advantage. These are the key features of Master Tactician. To sum it up very fast, if you are to whack enemies with a Master Tactician, then you need it. If you find yourself playing as a supportive Master Tactician and you don't whack enemies that much, then you don't need this talent. The next talent would be Nerves of Steel. Whenever the Master Tactician or their allies gain momentum, they gain +1 more. Whenever the Master Tactician or the allies lose momentum, they lose -1 less. Good, okay, as an officer you're there to build up momentum, resolve into momentum, into ultis for your companions. As an officer, as a Master Tactician officer, now you're here again to build this up even further. It's a great talent. You're gonna use ultis more often. The next talent would be a Suppressive Fire. All enemies hit by the Master Tactician have 10% higher chances of hitting a cover when shooting at the Master Tactician allies behind a cover. Absolutely great. You're gonna hug cover a lot, especially if you play on harder difficulties. You're gonna hug the cover like crazy, and this is a 10% higher chance of not receiving damage while in cover. The next talent would be Against All Odds. The Master Tactician begins combat with additional stacks of Tactical Advantage equal to the number of enemies. Yeah, it's good. Why do I say that it's good? In this game, it can happen that the game throws 30 enemies at once on you. And a lot of times you'll fight above 10 enemies. And that means automatically 10+ stacks. And you need those stacks to be stronger. So, yes, Against All Odds is an extremely great talent. This is like a bread and butter talent for the Master Tactician. The next one would be At the Edge. The Master Tactician deals 12% more damage to targets with less than 50% health and heals 20% more health for targets with less than 50% health. When enemies are low on health, you hurt them more. When allies are low on health, you heal them more. Okay, that's the spell. Good talent. The next one would be Reliance. Using Linchpin now spends only a quarter stacks of Tactical Advantage instead of a half. If you are to use Linchpin, then yeah, you should go with it, if you decide to use Linchpin. I already told you what I think about Linchpin and what I think about Strongpoint. I believe Strongpoint is better. The next talent would be In the Hero's Footsteps. The Master Tactician immediately gains an extra turn with Master Tactician Fellowship bonus divided by 3 action points and full movement points the first time any of the Master Tactician allies uses a heroic act in a combat and finishes their turn. To put it up short, this is a great talent. You will get to play again once an ally uses a heroic act, or better to say, once an ally or your companion uses an ulti, you will get a chance to fix the fight. Good one, good talent. I don't know why it's not recommended though. The next talent would be Personal Involvement. Every enemy killed by the Master Tactician increases the Master Tactician resolve by +1 until the end of combat. Good one again. Why? I already said there's a lot of enemies in combat. With every kill, resolve goes up. Resolve goes up, momentum goes faster. Momentum goes faster. You can use ulti faster. Hey, good talent. The next one would be Salvation. Using medkits on an ally under the effects. You're not here to heal. Okay, you're just not here to heal, but let's see. Using medkits on an ally under the effects of Tactician Doctrine abilities heals the target for additional wounds equal to Tactician Fellowship bonus plus the target's toughness bonus and removes 1 extra injury without any tests. This part without any tests is huge actually, okay, but you're not there to heal. Only because this without any tests, curing injuries, okay, it's automatic injury cure. Only because of that this talent is good. Otherwise, it's whatever. The next talent would be Tactical Respite. Whenever the Master Tactician reloads a weapon, all allies within a 3-cell radius around the Master Tactician also reload their weapons. You need to know your game if you wanna play with this. You need to have a specific team, you need to count even the bullets that you're shooting with, and you need to know how to position. This is only valid for unfair. Hard and below should play without Tactical Respite. This is unfair talent. Very good, but extremely hard to learn. The next one would be Cost Effective. Grenades and medkits cost 1 less action point to use to a minimum of 0. Good, yeah, good, but if you took Grenadier, you don't need it. So, you see what you do now, whether you're gonna take Grenadier from Talents 2 or you're gonna take Cost Effective from the Master Tactician. This is your choice. The next one would be Stand Resolute. Whenever the Master Tactician heals an ally, that ally gains +1 resolve until the end of combat. The effect stacks up to a maximum of plus Fellowship. It's good because it's scaled with Fellowship, okay, and because you can build Resolve, aka Momentum, aka your ulti. But I would not recommend because there are better talents. And I already told you what are the good ones. The next one would be Support the Advance. At the beginning of the Master Tactician turn, if their momentum is higher than 125, the first burst fire or area attack used by the Master Tactician this turn will cost 1 less action point to a minimum of 0. It's actually brilliant, but it requires a specific weapon. Okay, a specific weapon with a specific weapon proficiency and a very aggressive playstyle. For example, if you play with a sniper, the talent is useless, but if you play with a bolter, then it's good. Okay, that's how it goes here. Your weapon of choice depends whether you will take this talent or not. The next talent would be Ally Coordination. All allies have a 25% dodge against attacks made by allies, deal -25% less damage to allies, and deal 50% less additional damage with critical hits against allies. Don't shoot at your allies, and do not use this talent. Position and avoid friendly fire, instead of taking this stupid talent and wasting a talent point. It's useless. The next talent would be Undisputed Advantage. Press the advantage, ignores covers and dodge. Good. Whenever you can ignore enemy dodge or ignore the cover, that's a good talent, because enemies hug covers a lot. The next one would be Heroic Inspiration. The first ability the Master Tactician uses after the very first heroic act used in combat will cost 0 action points until the end of combat. Even though it sounds good, you don't need it, because here you're already level like 20, 25, 30, you already have a lot of action points, okay, and a lot of things to do and upgrade and, you know, to use in combat. And now whether you're gonna have a free action point of some ability after the ulti doesn't matter. Or better to say, once you use ulti, if you're incapable of winning the fight after the ulti, just reload, because that one single skill, one ability after the ulti that costs 0 action points won't save your ass. You need to win with those ultis. The next talent would be logistical superiority. Whenever the Master Tactician or the Master Tactician's ally uses any consumable, for example grenades, medkits and so on, there are stim packs as well, stims, injections and so on, or reloads a weapon, the Master Tactician will gain 2 stacks of tactical advantage. It is bread and butter, okay, your stacks of how strong you actually are as a Master Tactician. And yes, this is a very solid talent. The next one would be Comfort in Conformity. Whenever an ally grants the Master Tactician stacks of tactical advantage, the ally will also heal 1 wound for every stack granted. It's only 1 wound, even if he gives 5 wounds, 5 HP. Gotcha. Stacking the deck. Whenever the Master Tactician spends tactical advantage stacks on abilities, the critical damage dealt by the Master Tactician increases by 1% for every stack spent until the end of the turn. Let's translate this. It will be extremely hard to gain some huge benefits out of this talent, so just ignore. The next one will be Dawn of Victory. Every critical hit the Master Tactician makes grants them momentum equal to half of their resolve, works up to 3 times per turn. Solid, I guess, but I would not say that it's useful on a harder difficulties. The next talent would be Unwavering Motivation. The target of Inspire gains +1 additional damage for every 10 stacks of tactical advantage until the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn. This is good, because you will use Inspire, and why not to get that +1 to damage every time on every 10 stacks, you know, no matter who you buff. It counts, especially on bursters. The next one would be Primary Objective. Assign Objective also makes the target suffer 7% more damage from any source until the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn. If you play first, and you use Assign Objective, and then all allies play after you, then the spell is useful. Okay, I mean talent that buffs the spell. It buffs Assign Objective, and only if you play first. If you play like 3rd, 4th, it ain't that good. So you need to make sure that you play first. The next one would be Stronghold. Strong Point also grants half the amount of temporary wounds to the ally closest to the target. This is a very good talent, okay, because I told you that Stronghold is a very good ability. This makes Stronghold, or better to say Strong Point, even better. Very good. And the last talent for the Master Tactician would be a Perfect Finish. Finish the job gains 75% chance of a crit. So you remember what I said for Finish the Job? This makes it 75% chance to crit. I said that you need to really know how to play this game to trigger Finish the Job. It's one of the best spells in a game, but it's very hard to trigger this. And that talent upgrades this already great spell. Very good, but avoid if you're a beginner. Now, as far as Talent 2 goes, Talents 2, or second tier of talents for the Master Tactician, they're exactly the same like for the Officer, okay? And what you didn't learn back then, you can learn it now. If you found your weapon of choice, finally upgrade weapon proficiency, upgrade some dodge, upgrade some hit points, or better to say wounds, take those Grenadier, passives and so on. You can do that. Now let's check ultimate upgrades for the Directed Firestorm for the Officer, Master, Tactician. When you mark an area, all allies shoot enemies in that area. That's your ulti. Okay, now instead of shooting once, they're gonna make 2 attacks. Solid upgrade. Upgrade 2, Directed Firestorm and Last Volley can be used multiple times per combat, once per turn. Good upgrade, but for this part over here, when you're about to end. Okay, not over here, but over here, because you need to be stronger, you need more stacks. The higher the level, the better the stacks, and then you can trigger this multiple times per turn. In other case, if you take it earlier, you're gonna regret because you won't be able to use it. So that's why you need to go with the first one. Okay. The third option. All allies, including the Master Tactician that have a weapon capable of a burst fire, use burst fire instead of a single shot to attack enemies as a part of Directed Firestorm and Last Volley. Until the beginning of the Master Tactician next turn, allies automatically dodge all friendly fire. Oh man, you need to know what you're doing for the third upgrade. Basically, for the Master Tactician Archetype Officer, you really need to know the game well. This is not an easy class to play with. It's far better with a Vanguard and easier, yeah. Here you need to strategize like crazy, that's why it's Master Tactician. Not all allies will have burst weapons. If they have burst weapons, and that's like, I don't know if 0.1% of players will have a full team with burst weapons to make this count. Okay, so ignore it. And the last one, all allies, including the Master Tactician, that have a weapon capable of area attacks this time. You know, the third one was the burst fire, and this is the AoE fire. They have area of attacks, they're gonna use area of attacks instead of a single strike. Okay, to attack enemies as part of as part of the ulti. All allies within the zone will get 35% armor until the end of the Master Tactician next turn. Not bad, okay. You can kinda exploit this one a bit better because of the armor buff. So what would I say for this right now? The first one is the one that you should learn immediately, and then when you reach here, okay, this is where you need to pick one out of these three, and the one I would take would be multiple times, okay, and I would ignore this two because they are really, you need a team composition for both of them, extremely good team composition, and that's the main issue. Not only that you need good team composition, you also need good weapon of choice on every character. That would be it for Master Tactician, and again, to repeat, Master Tactician is an offensive officer support, aggressive officer. The best option would be Navy Officer. Origin. The best homeworld would be Hive or Fortress. End of story. Also, if you like playing with spells, you can play as a Sanctioned Psyker Biomancer for the offensive officer, or better to say, for the Master Tactician. If you know what you're doing, and on your second, third run and so on, you can always play as Astra Militarum Commander for the Master Tactician. If you decide to play as a Psyker, you go with a Voidborn, of course. And the next one, and the last archetype for the officer, would be Grand Strategist. Let's see what's the Grand Strategist. The keystone feature is basically, instead of single target buffs and debuffs, this time you pick an area on the map and you buff up all companions in a specific area. That's the main keystone feature. Grand Strategist buffs up the ground, okay, that you walk upon. Or to make it short, in the first turn he has front line, back line, and rear line buffs. Okay, after that, after the first turn passes, you get to buff with one only, whether it's front line, back line, or rear. Okay, so Grand Strategist is very good for that first round, okay, where you transition, where you're gonna position, where you're gonna dominate enemies from the very start, and then the battle goes in your favor. That's why the name of the archetype, the name of the subclass, is the Grand Strategist. The ulti for the Grand Strategist says next. You will target a point within a 15 cell radius away from you, and the Grand Strategist chooses one combat tactics area. Every ally inside the area will gain additional turn. So every ally inside that area will gain an additional turn with 1 action point and 2 movement points at the start of the Grand Strategist next turn. So you prep them during a turn, you trigger the ulti, you wanna make sure that a lot of allies are in the area that you're buffing, and on the next turn everyone will receive an additional action point. Now multiply that with 5 companions. You can see how much you gain. For every enemy that was killed in the selected combat tactics area, the additional action points is increased by +1 up to a maximum of 3, and the additional movement points is increased by +2 up to a maximum of 6. So now, when you buff them all up, as long as you make kills, they gonna make action points, okay? Movement points more or less are not that important, but action points are very important. So The more you're winning, the more you will stomp during this ulti. You're gonna finish up fights faster, and that's basically the ulti. Where would I put it among all ultis in the game so far? I would still say that the best ulti is by far on a flat officer. This one mimics that ulti from the officer, only this is the area of effect instead of a single target, but with a bit smaller benefits. Okay, that's the entire difference between take and hold and officer's ulti. And now we come to active skills, active spells, or better to say abilities. All abilities for the strategist are of course stratagems. Stratagems that's gonna buff or debuff the map. Now let's see what they do. The first one would be a kill zone stratagem. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactics areas. You get 3 areas to pick from: front line, back line, and rear line. For 1 round, all enemies in the area are forced to reroll successful dodge and parry tests against all attacks. Any enemies that suffer damage and are left with less than 2 times Grand Strategist intelligence plus fellowship bonus wounds immediately die. To make it short and what this ability does, it makes enemies weaker and they're easier to hit and they're easier to kill. That's what a kill zone stratagem is. A very good ability, extremely good. The next one would be overwhelming stratagem. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactic areas. For a round, all attacks by allies in that area will gain covering against any enemy that fails a willpower test. What is covering? Enemies will suffer -5 + 2 Grand Strategist intelligence and fellowship bonus on ballistic skill, -25% rate of fire, and -5 + 5 Strategist intelligence fellowship bonus weapon skill during attacks against these allies. Additionally, melee enemies have their movement points reduced by -3 and range enemies try to get into cover. An enemy counts as a melee enemy if they have at least 1 melee weapon. The additional effects does not work on some stronger enemies. So to put it short and translate this, when you have a lot of enemies against you and they are all smaller enemies, weaker enemies, but there's a lot of them, like 15 plus, and that happen often. Once you do the overwhelming stratagem, they're gonna scatter, you're gonna debuff them in a lot of different ways, and they will be easier to kill. What is the main point of this? It's to eradicate smaller enemies. It won't work on big enemies, so actually this stratagem is not as useful as other stratagems because there's a lot of big enemies in the game as well. So you need to be careful when you're gonna use this one. For now, I would say that the kill zone stratagem is way much better than the overwhelming stratagem. The next stratagem would be the stronghold stratagem. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactic areas. For a round, allies in that area will gain +3 plus Grand Strategist intelligence fellowship bonus divided by 2, percentage to armor, cannot be over penetrated, gain immunity to the prone effect, which is very good, and they're gonna gain Grand Strategist intelligence plus fellowship bonus divided by 4 deflection against area attacks. Additionally, they do not suffer injuries for receiving damage. To translate what this ability does, because it's actually very good and one of the best defensive abilities in the game. In the area, all allies receive armor percentage, they receive deflection against area damage from enemies, they cannot get on their asses, so no prone, and they cannot receive any injuries when they're shot or whacked. That's the ability. It's very good, and it's the second ability that you should learn after the kill zone stratagem. The next one would be a blitz stratagem. This is a movement ability. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactic areas. For a round, all allies within the range of Grand Strategist intelligence plus fellowship bonus cells against the ability to move to that area. This movement does not provoke attacks of opportunity and it does not spend movement points. In other words, free to move cells, okay, where you don't provoke attacks of opportunity. When enemies go for your squishy, you ram blitz stratagem and you extract the squishy out. Okay, no one whacks your squishy companion. That's what the blitz stratagem is for. I would say third most important ability for the Grand Strategist. The next one would be a combat locus stratagem. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactic areas. For a round, the targeted area bonuses are doubled. All other tactical areas are discharged and cannot be used this turn, but can be designated again next round. When you wanna become extremely aggressive and you get to spawn 3 areas, front line, back line and rear line. Each of those areas gives something specific, okay? Some are defensive, some are ranged, some are go all in melees, okay? And once you decide what type of area you like the most, or better to say, once you decide what kind of gameplay you prefer the most with the Grand Strategist, then you're gonna use Combat Locus Stratagem. And you're gonna enhance all the benefits of the area, or better to say, they're gonna be doubled. You're gonna be stronger. All companions in that area will be stronger than with the classic stratagems. I would say that it's worth it after the kill zone, after the stronghold, and after the blitz stratagem. And the last one would be a trench line stratagem. The Grand Strategist chooses one of the combat tactic areas. For a round, all allies in the area will gain +5 plus Grand Strategist Intelligence Fellowship bonus, percentage to cover efficiency, and reroll all failed characteristic tests. Additionally, cover in the area does not suffer any damage. Enemies can whack your cover, they can destroy your cover. And this stratagem won't allow enemies to destroy your cover. Okay? Which is very good, you will be in cover non-stop. That's what a stratagem is for, basically. The reroll part comes from characteristics. Some of them will save you from the mind control and things like that, okay? Specific unique things during combat or outside of combat, okay? Basically characteristics, skill checks and so on. In other words, you roll again and take a better result. I would say it's worth it like a 4th or 5th ability to learn. What you need to make sure of when you play Grand Strategist is that you pick an officer that's gonna have huge intelligence and huge fellowship. If you start with an officer, I told you it's a full support, it can be played as a Vanguard, as a Master Tactician and as a Grand Strategist. Grand Strategist is all around, but you need to be careful with the home world. Okay, and with Origin. You wanna search for intelligence and fellowship, both. For example, for a squishy Grand Strategist, you will go, for example, with a Voidborn, and you're gonna pick Commissar. Voidborn, Commissar. And now you covered fellowship, and you covered intelligence. So your abilities will scale like crazy. That's one of the ways, okay? Also, as I said, the best one to do for the Grand Strategist would definitely be a Navy officer. If you really wanna stick to those stats and get both intelligence and fellowship that the Grand Strategist uses for his area, for his stratagems, okay, to scale like crazy, then it is noble, because it gives both, alright? But you won't be as useful in combat. You're gonna give orders, okay? You're gonna buff with officers' abilities, and then you're gonna buff areas with Grand Strategist abilities. So non-stop, you're gonna buff someone, okay? You won't whack enemies at all if you go with Noble. But Noble merges the best with the Grand Strategist by far. Now, it is time that we check talents for the Grand Strategist. The first one would be Point of Interest. All combat tactic bonuses are increased by Intelligence Fellowship. Imagine if you're Noble now, okay? Divided by 2 percentage if the area was not moved for 2 rounds. So where you spawn areas, you don't move your areas, okay? And all bonuses will be increased by your Intelligence and Fellowship bonus divided by 2. Point of Interest is a must and one of the best talents that you can grab, so PI is extremely important. The next one will be Diversion Zone. Using a stratagem on a rear area, you're gonna use stratagems non-stop, also makes the allies in that area the enemy's lowest priority targets for a round. So once you pick a rear area, you're gonna move, when combat starts, you position allies. You wanna position all squishes in rear area. And then you can learn diversion zone, and then enemies will not hit your squishes. They don't consider them as priority targets. You're gonna save your squishes. Extremely good talent. The next one would be Crossfire Zone. Using a stratagem on a frontline area now, grants allies in the area 10 plus 2 multiplied Grand Strategist, again Intelligence Fellowship bonus, increased dodge against other allies' attacks. This is for your melees, okay? They are your front line. And on the battlefield, when you put, for example, Abelard and Heinrichs up front, you're gonna use a Crossfire Zone and you will give them additional dodge chance to avoid enemy attacks. This is the AoE buff of the area for your melees. Extremely important talent as well. Now you need to decide whether you want to play with more squishes and protect your squishes, or whether you want to play with more melees and make them dodgier. This is your decision now. Both talents are great. The next talent would be Enduring Zone. Using a stratagem, and you're gonna use them a lot on a combat tactics area, grants all allies in the area intelligence deflection against the next melee hit they suffer. To understand what it does, you need to understand what is intelligence deflection. It's the amount of damage you receive. Okay, how much you are able to deflect. You're gonna receive some damage, but you will deflect most of it, considering that Fellowship intelligence is huge. Also, the benefit is huge for the Enduring Zone, where you're gonna protect your allies. I would say it's like 4th best option so far. The first 3 are better, but I would say this one is also great, but for later on. The next one would be Stirring Zone. Every time a combat tactics area is affected by a stratagem, all allies in that area gain +1 movement point bonus for the following turn. Stacks with itself. Not as useful, it's only +1 movement point, and yeah, it's a good thing that it stacks, but you don't need it. If you know how to position, you don't need it. I believe it's a waste of a talent, okay? Really a waste of a talent. You wanna go for more aggressive or more defensive talents, not as much with movement points, because as an officer, you are an officer Grand Strategist. As an officer, you already have abilities to move allies. You can call them back, you can give them additional action and movement points. Your ulti does that the same, okay? There's a lot of ways to extract allies or to move them around. You do not need this talent, so forget about it. It doesn't exist as an officer Grand Strategist. The next one would be Adjusting Frontline. If there are more enemies than allies in the frontline area, all allies in the area will gain +3 plus Grand Strategist Intelligence Fellowship bonus divided by 2 to parry and dodge. If there are more allies than enemies in the frontline area, all allies in the area deal additional damage scaling with Intelligence and Fellowship. Great talent. What is there to discuss? If there are more enemies, you're harder to kill. If there's more of you, you will deal more damage in a specific area. Great talent. No matter how you put it, you're gonna have a benefit out of this talent. Okay, no matter the situation in combat, you will have a benefit out of this talent. It's a great talent. The next one would be Personal Zone. Allies, including the Grand Strategist, in the same combat tactics area with the Grand Strategist gain +3 intelligence bonus divided by 2 to perception and agility. So, if you're gonna drag your allies around you in your combat area, in your combat tactics area, all of them will receive additional perception and agility. This depends out of your companions. If your companions benefit a lot out of perception and agility, then it's worth taking. If you take companions that benefit from other factors, like from strength and so on, toughness, then this Personal Zone is not that useful. Okay, you need to be careful whether you want to pick this one or not. Check your companions that you like the most, that you're gonna take on the campaign with you, basically, so they have perception and agility. In other words, do not use this one just like that. Make sure that everyone will benefit out of perception and agility. The next one would be a Strong Point. Using a stratagem on a combat tactics area for the second time in a turn, refunds 1 action point. This effect can be activated once per turn. Great one, okay, you're gonna use stratagems like crazy, because you are a Grand Strategist, okay? And a lot of times you will use multiple stratagems, especially later on in the game when you have more action points. So yeah, this is a great one. The next one would be Personal Combat Zone. Allies gain the ability to reposition the combat tactics area they're currently in at the cost of 1 action point. They can reposition between your areas, okay? So, how would I put this? Good for unfair, bad for lower difficulties. Okay, you don't need this one on lower difficulties, but you will need it on unfair. That's the case for this talent. The next one would be Critical Zone. Using a stratagem on a backline area grants allies in the area +3 intelligence fellowship bonus divided by 2, percentage increased critical hit chance against enemies they are protected by cover from. So enemies that are in cover, you gonna have increased critical chance and they gonna be easier to hit, but only for the allies that are in a backline area. Critical Zone is great, okay, especially if you have more companions that are ranged than melee in your squad, so be careful about that fact as well. The next one would be a Dashing Zone. Using a stratagem on a combat tactics area will grant all allies in the area the ability to move a cell without provoking attack of opportunity. This is another extraction talent, okay, and you already have a lot as an officer, a lot. You don't need it. Even though it's a good talent, you just don't need it. And that's a fact. The next one would be a Supporting Zone. Using a stratagem on a combat tactics area grants the Grand Strategist the ability to use all of officer abilities on allies in the area regardless of distance. Sometimes you won't be able to reach the ally and buff them up. This Supporting Zone talent counters that. You will be able to reach them even if they're 2 screens away from you. And yes, if you ask right now, there are fights in a game where the distance from your companions could be like 3 full screens, okay? And that's far above 20 or 30 cells distance, right? So yes, you can benefit out of this one. And would I recommend? Yeah, for harder difficulties, not for easier difficulties. The next one would be Strategic Perfection. Each time the Grand Strategist uses a stratagem, they gain a stack of Strategic Protection effect. At 6 stacks of Strategic Protection, the next stratagem applies the benefits of all stratagems known by the Grand Strategist, and all the stacks are removed. Freaking epic. To put it short and what it does, you go turn 1 a stratagem, turn 3 a stratagem, turn 2 a stratagem, turn 3 a stratagem, different stratagems, okay, that's your abilities, active skills. And then once you acquire 6 stacks on 4th one, okay, because you can cast multiple stratagems as well, the next one you cast is all of them in the area at once. Okay, all the benefits from all of your learned stratagems at once. Absolutely crazy good talent. Strategic Perfection is great talent. The next one would be Improvised Strategy. At the start of the combat, the Grand Strategist gains 1 random unknown stratagem and can use it until the end of combat for 0 action points. Gamble. If you like to gamble, every time when the combat starts you receive 1 stratagem at random and it costs 0 action points to use. You can get lucky, okay, or it can backfire, but in case of a rogue trader, and this is a CRPG, if you like to load, or better to say to quick load, you enter combat, you don't like a stratagem you receive, you quick load. And you do it like 3-4 times until you get a stratagem that you like and you can easily win the fight. It's cheese, basically, this one. Good, but I would avoid it completely because it's cheese. It's gonna ruin the entire game balance. Okay. The next one would be a Sniping Zone. Each ally in the rear area gains +3 plus Grand Strategist Intelligence Fellowship bonus divided by 2% the critical hit chance if there are no enemies in a 5-cell radius around the ally. This is very simple. The rear line gets stronger if there are no enemies around, and there's usually no enemies around because that's where your shooters are. Okay, your main damage output is there, your squishes, and they gonna receive a critical hit chance. It can backfire though, because if melee goes towards them, then you're doomed. So that's why you need a companion that's able to taunt for the front line. Okay, so your rear line gets intact. Solid talent. The next one would be a shooting gallery zone. If there are no enemies in the backline area, the first attack in turn made by every ally in the area will cost 1 action point less. This is a good one, especially if you have companions that have huge weapons in a backline. Okay, if you want to use like 2 or 3 action points shot that are more powerful than a single shot from 1 action point, yeah. Now they're gonna cost 1 action point less, and you will be able to deal a lot of damage and still have action points available for self buffs or other stuff in the game. Shooting gallery zone is extremely good, in other words. The next talent would be a disputed zone. Enemies in the same combat tactics area with the Grand Strategist suffer -3 Grand Strategist Intelligence Fellowship bonus divided by 2 penalty to dodge and parry. When the enemies are in the same area as you, they're easier to hit. That's the talent. It's a good one, okay, but what's the point of a Grand Strategist? Grand Strategist is squishy, and you wanna keep your Grand Strategist back, not in a front line, okay? You want him back, safe, in some full cover, where he's gonna command and buff everyone around, okay? He is squishy. If you are in a situation where you are surrounded by enemies, then you're practically doomed. So the talent, as good as it sounds, it ain't useful. The next one would be Strategic Offensive. Every enemy killed in a frontline area increases all bonuses of combat tactic areas by +1 until the end of combat. Very good talent, because your frontline would be a Space Wolf, Heinrichs, Abelard. They're gonna create a lot of kills. Okay, and the more they kill, the stronger the area is, hence the stronger your companions in the area are. Great talent. The next one would be Respite Zone. All allies in the rear area are healed by medkits for +5 plus Grand Strategist Intelligence Fellowship bonus more and gain the same amount of temporary wounds. Medkits used by allies in the rear area will cost 1 action point less. If you find the game hard, Respite Zone can save you. It's gonna make it a bit easier because you get temporary wounds out of the medkits, a better healing and so on, okay? And you keep your rear line safe. I would not advise this to anyone that plays hard or unfair. If you are in a situation where you're gonna need that amount of medkits during the combat, then you're pretty much not doing something right. Okay, you need to be the one that leads the combat and you need to be the one that's aggressive, not the enemies. This is a defensive talent. The next one would be Inescapable Zone. Rerolls forced by Kill Zone Stratagem are made with -15 penalty. You're gonna use Kill Zone Stratagem like crazy. This is important talent. It makes Kill Zone Stratagem stronger. And you will use it a lot. It's a bread and butter ability for the Grand Strategist. Very good talent. The next one will be Fortress Zone. Allies under the effect of Trench Line Stratagem will dodge area attacks without movement and are immune to all types of forced movement. You know, in this game, when enemies target you with area of effect, okay, with grenades, with some weapons that can cover like 9 cells and so on, when your allies dodge, they move. They don't stand there and there is a sign dodge, okay? There's a sign dodge and they step away, they roll aside, they move. If they're in cover, someone uses area, they move when they dodge, so they get out of cover. And then you can also get fucked like that. Okay, with the Fortress Zone, they do not move, they just say dodge, but they remain in cover. Whether it's a good talent or not depends whether you have space for this talent or not, because there's a lot of great talents on a Grand Strategist. I told you what are the great ones. This one is very, very solid. The next one would be Daunting Zone. Willpower tests forced by overwhelming stratagem are made with a -5 + 2 Intelligence Fellowship bonus penalty. You don't need this one. Very simple. The next one will be Opening Strategy. The first stratagem used in a turn can be used a second time for 0 action points. Good. Good, especially if you merge it with a talent that gives stacks and then you have a stratagem that collects all other stratagems into one. This talent merges with that talent like crazy. Okay, I already told you what's a crazy talent. Now imagine merging this talent with that one. your stratagems will be crazy good. Next one will be Overcoming Zone. Every time allies under the effect of Stronghold stratagem should have suffered an injury, they gain Intelligence Fellowship bonus temporary wounds instead. When enemies shoot you, when they whack you, there is a chance that you will receive an injury. Broken rib, cracked head, broken leg, and so on. So this time, when you are in a Stronghold stratagem, and they whack you, and when they trigger an injury, it won't be an injury, but you're gonna receive temporary wounds instead, or better, you're gonna receive additional health instead of an injury. Yes, it's a good talent. Very good. And the last talent would be a Blurred Locus. After the use of a Combat Locus stratagem, one of the areas removed by Combat Locus stratagem can be recreated immediately. Basically, you move a stratagem, like if the combat transferred from the right part of the screen to the left part, and now you say, holy shit, I wasted a stratagem on the right. With this talent, you can move the one on the right for free on the left side, like nothing happened. If there is space among these talents, then yes, you can use Blur Locus, it can be beneficial. Now, it's time that we check Take and Hold, or better to say, ultimate upgrades. So we already know that ulti gives AoE action points and movement points to allies. That's the ulti. Upgrade 1. All allies in the selected area will also gain 20% dodge, parry, and armor. All allies are harder to kill. Good. Ulti upgrade. All allies in the selected areas have their weapon skill and ballistics increased by 20. Good, they're gonna hurt more. They're gonna be able to hit more often. All attacks by allies located in a selected area ignore 20% of enemies' dodge and armor. You will be able to hit enemies more often. The maximum number of action points granted by Take and Hold is increased to +5. All 4 are good. What we gonna do now? Every single upgrade is great for the Grand Strategist, and this is one of the rare cases where every single one is great. Usually it's very easy for me to pick the good ones out of bad ones, out of bad upgrades. This, everything is good. So what would I take on a Grand Strategist for the first upgrade, and what would I take for the second upgrade, because you can only upgrade twice. So you ditch 2, you get 2. I would definitely take action points. Alright. Now, it depends whether your team is aggressive or defensive. So, what companions do you use? If you use companions that are extremely aggressive, and if you go in that wipe them all in a round or 2, then you're gonna go with something like weapons and ballistics. Okay, aggressive type of play. If you play with more tanky companions in your team for the second upgrade, or better to say for this one, you're gonna take something like dodge, parry, and armor. Okay, so you can withstand those hits from enemies. Also, for the offensive part, you can pick one out of these 2, whether it's gonna be +20 to VS and BS, or whether you're gonna decrease dodge and armor for enemies. In my personal opinion, it seems like that this game is better to debuff enemies than to buff allies. Okay, that's the impression I got out of playtime, that it's better to debuff than to buff. I don't know why, but I have a feeling like it's like that. So, number 1 upgrade would be the upgrade 4. For offense, 4 into 3. For defense, 4 into 1. And we ignore the second one, even though it's great as well. You can make a mistake no matter what you do. It just depends out of the difficulty you play on. So now, officer, once you decide to become a Vanguard, Master Tactician, or a Grand Strategist, the last thing that remains after level 36 is the final upgrade, and that would be Officer Exemplar. What we're gonna cover is Officer Vanguard Exemplar, Officer Master Tactician Exemplar, and Officer Grand Strategist Exemplar. Let's begin with the Exemplar and check the most important talents and what you should upgrade. The rest of these are characteristics and so on. They are strictly depend out of your build and what you're about to play. If you play as range, you need ballistic. If you play as melee Vanguard officer, you need weapon skill, or toughness, or strength, or fellowship. Okay, in most cases, people will need intelligence and fellowship as an officer, especially if you go with a master tactician or grand strategist. So the Exemplar has a lot of useless spells, and now we're gonna divide everything for the officer Vanguard, officer master tactician, and officer grand strategist. What talent goes to what type, or better to say archetype of officer. The first one in line is Tough as Steel, Vanguard valid only. The second one would be Flesh Wounds, Vanguard valid only. The third one would be Full Attention, Vanguard valid only. Next one would be Little Threat, Vanguard only. The next one would be Tricky Defense. This is Master Tactician or Grand Strategist talent. The next one would be Critical Velocity. It's valid on everyone, all three archetypes. Vanguard, Master Tactician, and Grand Strategist. The next one would be Unbreakable Will. It's only valid on a Vanguard. The next one would be Unstoppable, valid on Vanguard only. The next one would be Relentless, only on Vanguard and Grand Strategist. The next one would be Martyrdom, valid on all, Vanguard, Strategist, and Master Tactician. The next one would be Steel Shell, valid on Vanguard only. The next one would be Peak Condition, valid on Vanguard only. The next one would be Revenge, only valid on Vanguard. The next one would be Eager for Battle, valid on all, extremely good talent. You should learn it first. Okay, if you want more detailed explanations about every single talent, they are on my Warrior Exemplar video. Okay, right now I'm just telling you what's good for what type, archetype of the officer. So if you want a full detailed explanation like I do for everything that I do, then you check out Warrior and you'll see the full explanation of every single talent. So Eager for Battle is absolutely brutal on all archetypes of officer. The next one would be Death Dealer, valid on all, quite solid. You should learn it during this leveling here after level 36. The next one would be the Destroyer, valid on Vanguard only. The next one would be Grievous Wounds, valid on all archetypes of officer. The next one would be a Pinpoint Accuracy, valid on Master Tactician and Grand Strategist, so no Vanguard here. The next one would be Extermination. It's valid on all, but Master Tactician profits out the most out of this talent, Extermination. The next one would be Cataclysm, valid on all archetypes of the officer. And now we go into the great part. The first one would be Eager Subordinates, valid on all, absolutely crazy good talent, and you should learn it as fast as you can. Attention, valid on all type of officer. Okay, this Exemplar talent should be learned as fast as you can. It's extremely good. The next one, Firebrand, valid on all archetypes of the officer. You should learn it ASAP. Okay, so these three here are crazy good. Now we go into the Flag Bearer. Flag Bearer is also valid on all, crazy good talent. Vanguard profits out the most out of the talent, but it's good on all archetypes basically. It's a crazy good talent. The next one would be Degraded Defense. It's valid on all, but best on a Master Tactician. The next one would be Puncture, valid on Master Tactician only. The next one would be Deadly Aim, valid on Master Tactician and Grand Strategist. The next one would be Masterful Precision. I would say that it's quite useless unless you use Finish the Job spell on Master Tactician. In other words, you can easily avoid Masterful Precision. The next one would be a Crushing Assault. It's valid on Vanguard only. The next one would be Out of My Way. Completely useless on Officer. Completely useless. The next one would be Combat Meditation. It is only valid if you decide to play as a Psyker officer, no matter the archetype. The next one would be Malign Influence, again only valid on a Psyker officer. The next one would be Contagion, only valid on a Psyker officer. The next one would be Perfection Under Fire, valid on all, one of the best talents in the game. That's how great it is, valid on all types of officer or archetypes. The next one would be Shot Through, valid on Master Tactician only. The next one would be Know It All. Know It All is probably the best freaking talent that exists in the game, no matter if it's the officer or someone else, but for this type, okay, of the officer that scales with fellowship and intelligence, this is the best talent that you can take. So Know It All is extremely good. The next one would be Carnage, Disastrous Collision, and Masterful Display, and that would be all of them. Masterful Display, Disastrous Collision, and Carnage, you should avoid them when playing the officer. And that would be all the talents. I gave you the best ones, I specified what they are, I gave you good ones, I gave you those that are archetype, or better to say, class specific for the Vanguard, for the Master Tactician, for the Grand Strategist. And now you decide what you wanna play, use my previous guides for the default officer and the prep to become a Vanguard, Master Tactician, Grand Strategist, and then pick the talents that I gave for the Exemplar accordingly. My advice is again to use paper, put down what you want to play, mark the home world that I say that is great, the origin that I say that is great for the specific archetype, then prepare to play a specific archetype, and then just said the Exemplar talents at the end that I said that work with a specific archetype, and you're good to go. So a piece of paper in your hands, it takes like 5 minutes to write it all down, and you're good to go. You can play how you like. I did not create the guides to be specific, like play this build, you know, and you need to stick with it. I give you options, I tell you what's good, and then you decide what you want to learn and when, and how you want to develop your rogue trader. Okay. That would be it with the Exemplar, and with that we also finish the full officer guide. We covered every single aspect that exists, from abilities, active abilities, talents, spells, and characteristics. You don't need to know much. Fellowship is the most important thing when you play an officer, because you are the leader of the team, you're the main support. No matter if you're tanky or squishy, you are the main support. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I thank to all of my patrons and all of the members on my YouTube channel. As always, thank you all for your support, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching.
Are you ready for Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader? As I am. The Emperor protects.